and protesters overnight. Head a bit further south, we see the General People's Congress, Parliament. It was here that there was reportedly on fire on Monday morning. Then we move further south again, I think it is, down to the army barracks. And you remember, Colonel Gaddafi's son warned the armed forces would enforce security at any price. They're down there at the army barracks. The airport too, where foreign embassies and companies are getting ready to evacuate their staff. US State Department's started to do that with its staff as well. Non-essential members told them to get out. So that just puts it in perspective, gives you a bit of an idea of where things are if you're not familiar with Tripoli at all. More international reaction, because there's been plenty. South Korea's foreign ministry said hundreds of Libyans stormed a South Korean-operated construction site in the country. At least 17 people apparently injured in that incident near Tripoli.
As with the Egyptian incident, South Korea's Land, Transport and Maritime Affairs Ministry is preparing to send special flights to the site if necessary. There are several South Korean construction camps in the Benghazi area. We have selected the largest and safest camp and chosen it as the safety shelter. We have taken measures so that South Korean people can all move and evacuate to the camp in case anything happens.
So international interests in Libya are crucial. They don't get more crucial than oil, of course. Just a couple of points to bring you there. First of all, BP, major oil player in the country, has said it hasn't ruled out withdrawing from Libya after the unrest. That was Chief Executive Bob Dudley who said that on Monday, not ruling out leaving the country. Oil so important to the economy. And we've heard from Saudi Arabia, we've heard from OPEC saying there's no problem with oil at the moment. There's plenty of supply and no one should be worried about it. The fact is oil is up at a 2.5-year high at the moment. Its price is very high at the moment, and that's the fear for any country that doesn't have anything to do with Libya directly. Well, they might think they do, but the supply of oil and the fears over supply of oil in the end is what can drive up oil and gas prices so easily. So that's one concern to think about with oil coming out of Libya. Perhaps we can look at some recent pictures which have come through from either Benghazi or Tripoli. This Benghazi, I think we've got. Stay with me one moment. No, haven't got that at the moment. What about the jets? Told you about this a little bit earlier. These two jets which essentially defected, or at least the two pilots on board defected. They were ordered to bomb the protesters or attack the protesters in Benghazi, and these two senior colonels from the Libyan Air Force said quite simply, we're not going to do that, turned their planes north and headed to Malta, which is an hour away, we're told, by air, landed completely unannounced and were detained when they arrived and announced that they had in fact defected. They simply couldn't attack their own people. Also reports of some helicopters that arrived carrying French nationals without passports. Apparently those people are detained as well. But this has been the sort of bizarre twist of the day, if you like. And one of our guests told me earlier, expect the unexpected in the Arab world, but expect the bizarre with Libya. And that's what we've seen with two fighter jets landing out of the blue, if I can use that phrase, in Malta. Some recent pictures in from Tripoli as well. Daytime pictures, so these will be quite a while ago, but it just illustrates the chaos. People everywhere, these four-wheel drives driving around. I'm not too sure who was in those ones. However, we've had reports of almost drive-by shootings, effectively, by what people describe as mercenaries, guns for hire, in Tripoli. Only a few weeks ago, we were looking at not dissimilar scenes in Egypt, I'd have to say, with this sort of chaos on the streets and wondering what was happening. And now we see it in Libya as well, so close. Familiar scenes of the black smoke rising across the sky over North Africa. Such a depth of feeling there is, such a depth of feeling. Posters being ripped down, set on fire. We saw pictures earlier of a video broadcast of Saif Gaddafi, the son of Muammar Gaddafi, people throwing their shoes at that projection there. It's absolute chaos in many parts of Tripoli, in many parts of Libya at the moment. Here's those pictures I was talking about a little bit earlier. That was when Colonel Gaddafi's son gave that speech. It was projected on the wall. I think that was our sister channel, AlJazeera Arabic, as well, and people throwing their shoes at that projection, which is considered quite an insult in the Arab world. These pictures from Tripoli as well, I believe. Yes, they are. Burning in the streets. Signs of a popular uprising. And then the other side of it, the people who are wounded. There are talk of people dying. Of course, Human Rights Watch latest number was 223, but that was last night. There have been reports of perhaps 250 people killed today alone. Bear with me one moment while I check some of the latest lines coming out. The Qatari foreign minister, who's also the prime minister of the country, calls Amr Moussa, the Secretary General of the Arab League, who we saw a little bit earlier, has asked him to hold an emergency meeting of the Arab League Council to discuss the situation in Libya. Qatar, one of the few countries coming out so far, condemning the use of live ammunition and warplanes to attack the people of Libya, and now going one step further, saying to Amr Moussa, get the Arab League together for an emergency meeting as soon as possible to discuss the situation in Libya. Let's go to the phone. Shireen Tadros is our correspondent, you'll remember from what was going on in Egypt about a week ago. I guess just what we're seeing in Libya now, Shireen, just shows us how incredibly fast things can move in the Arab world.
Yeah, absolutely, and just how incredibly dangerous things can fast become. Over here, I think the key difference was in the actions of the military, if indeed it is true, and of course it's so difficult to get any information out of Libya, but if it is true that the military are firing on their people, that of course is a huge difference between what is happening there in the uprising in Egypt. Over here we saw the military come out almost from the very first day that they rolled their tanks in and say that they won't be firing on protesters, that they are holding the hands of the people, and they maintained that, although there was a lot of criticism in the weeks that followed that the military weren't getting involved in the day-to-day scuffles and then clashes that then occurred. There was an understanding that if they did get involved, if they did shoot at protesters, we'd be looking at a completely different ballgame. And there was a lot of respect that came from the Egyptian people towards the military because of that restraint. And I think what we're seeing in Libya and these dramatic events unfolding this evening really just show just how fast things can escalate once the military do get involved and indeed turn against the people and are for the government. Now that of course is assuming that it is the military. A lot of people in Libya saying that in fact those that are dropping the bombs aren't the military, they are mercenaries, the paid mercenaries, and the private militias, which since the late 1980s have somewhat overpowered the military in Libya. It's a very different dynamic to Egypt. There's certainly people here watching the events unfolding in the neighboring country in Libya with very careful eyes and a great deal of sympathy, really.
You say it's a different dynamic, and yes, it is unfolding in a slightly